I was standing in a linen closet at my sister's wedding, holding a dress the color of a traffic cone, when I understood that my whole family had agreed on something behind my back. 7 bridesmaids stood in the sunlit suite down the hall, slipping into identical lavender gowns, fitted floor-length, beautiful, and me, the eldest sister, they'd handed a bright orange sack marked 2XL, 3 sizes too big. The shoulders drooped past my arms, the waist could have fit 2 of me. When I asked my sister Sloane about it, she tilted her head and smiled and said the same 5 words she'd say all day. It was the only one left. I almost drove home right then. I'm glad I didn't, because 3 hours later, a 79-year-old woman would cross a silent ballroom, sit down beside me in that ridiculous dress, take my hand in front of 200 people, and say 6 words that ended my sister's wedding before the cake was ever cut. But to understand those 6 words, you have to understand what kind of family hands their oldest daughter a clown suit and calls it a gift. My name is Brooke Bennett. I'm 33, and I'm a structural engineer. I co-own a small firm in Raleigh that does commercial inspections and retrofit designs. Nothing glamorous, but it's mine. I built it from a community college transfer, 3 years of waitressing at a steakhouse, and a state university degree I paid for myself, dollar by dollar, tip by tip. My sister Sloane is 4 years younger, and she has always been the sun the rest of us orbit. She's charming, she photographs well, she has a laugh that makes strangers lean closer. And that spring, she was marrying Daniel Whitlock, whose family owned half the vineyards in the Shenandoah Valley. Old Virginia money, the kind of family that names buildings after grandparents and keeps a land trust instead of a savings account. Daniel himself was decent, quiet. He opened doors, remembered names, and seemed genuinely baffled by how lucky he'd gotten. But the real center of gravity in that family was his grandmother, Margaret Whitlock. 79, small, silver-haired. Posture like a steel beam, and a pearl-handled cane she rested across her knees while she watched everything. My mother, Diane, had been planning this wedding like a general plans an invasion. Every centerpiece, every toast, every seat calibrated for maximum impression on the Whitlock side. I was in the bridal party for one reason only. Bride who doesn't invite her own sister raises questions. So I was in. Technically, I got the text 3 weeks out. Your bridesmaid is 8. Sloane wrote, no emoji, no warmth, just a slot number. 8 bridesmaids, 7 lavender gowns. The math had been decided before I ever SPP'd, and I was too tired to read it. I should tell you about my grandmother too, Ruth Draper. When she got sick, emphysema, then a stroke that took her left side. I was the one who moved in. I was 28, 2 years into my first engineering job, and I rearranged my entire life around her medications and her therapy appointments. 3 years I bathed her, I read to her. I held her hand on the nights she forgot where she was. Sloane visited twice. Once for Thanksgiving, once to get a loan co-signed. Gran died at 84 on a Tuesday with her hand in mine. I drove 4 hours to that wedding without complaining. Showing up is what I do. It's my best quality and my worst habit, and Sloane knew it. But I had no idea how bad it was about to get. I walked the orange dress back into the bridal suite. 7 women in monogrammed robes, champagne on ice, a ring light glowing. Sloane, this can't be right. It's 3 sizes too big. She didn't look up from her phone. It was the only one left, behind her. My Aunt Renee adjusted her own perfect sash. Stop being dramatic, Brooke. It's not about you. Nobody said a word in my defense. Not one of the 7. So I went back to the closet, pinned the waist with 2 safety pins, and stood in front of a mirror propped against a stack of folding chairs. I saw exactly what they wanted me to see. Someone who didn't belong. I found my mother in the hallway. Mom, the dress doesn't fit. Can we swap with one of the spares? There are 2 extra lavender gowns on the rack. She straightened, and her face went to that patient, closed expression she used when I asked for things as a child. Those are for emergencies. This is an emergency. Brooke, don't ruin your sister's day. You know how hard she's worked. She turned back to the flower girl. Just wear the dress. Nobody's looking at you anyway. 2 spare gowns, 10 feet away. One of them close to my size. I'd seen the tag. It was the only one left. Was a lie. I just didn't know yet how deep it ran. Then at cocktail hour, I found out. I was standing maybe 8 feet from Sloane when I heard her tell Daniel's great aunt. I put myself through school. Community college first, then state. Waitressing nights. Nobody handed me anything. Those were my words. That was my life. And the engineering, the great aunt asked. Structural engineering, Sloane said without blinking. Small firm stuff. But it's so rewarding to build something real. She was standing in a $5,000 gown telling strangers she was me. I went to her by the dessert table. You told her you put yourself through engineering school. You dropped out of Belmont after 3 semesters. She studied a macaron. Brooke, you're imagining things. Then, just loud enough for a Whitlock cousin to hear, she leaned in. This is why nobody takes you seriously. Look at you. She gestured at the orange dress, the safety pins, the bunched fabric, and walked away. She hadn't denied it. She'd redirected. She'd used the dress she chose for me to make me look unstable for noticing. That isn't carelessness. That's architecture. That night, standing alone by a boxwood hedge, I made a decision that would change everything. The decision wasn't revenge. Not yet. The decision was simpler and lonelier than that. I decided to stop pretending my family was something it wasn't. My mother cornered me near the coat check before I could leave. Fundraiser smile, locked jaw. The Whitlocks have certain expectations, she said. Sloane needed to present a certain picture, a self-made picture, and she told them about you too. Enough so they'd understand why you two aren't close. What did she tell them about me? That you've struggled, that you have difficulties. She said the word. Issues. The way you'd say. Termites. Something unfortunate, best handled quietly. Mom, I own a company. I have a professional license. And nobody here needs to know that. Behave, Brooke. Don't be the reason this falls apart. She walked back toward the ballroom, and I leaned against a column and stared at the ceiling. They hadn't just excluded me from the photos, they'd rewritten me. I was the cover story, the troubled sister, the excuse. The reason Sloane could claim a life she never lived. The orange dress wasn't a mistake. It was a costume. Then Daniel, kind, decent Daniel, sat down across from me at my table by the kitchen door and thanked me for coming, considering everything. He squeezed my hand. He told me not to take the seating personally. He said Sloane warned them I might be sensitive. He meant it gently. He was a good man, repeating a lie he'd been fed like dinner. And then I found a phone under my chair. My mother's phone, left behind when she moved to the head table. A notification lit the screen. Bennett Girls Group Chat. I shouldn't have looked. I swiped anyway. Renee, what about the orange one in the clearance section? It's hideous and it's huge. Diane, perfect. She'll look like she doesn't belong, which she doesn't. Sloane, make sure the photographer keeps her in the back. And one line that stopped me cold. Sloane told them I nursed Gran through hospice. They loved it. Margaret, especially. My hands started shaking. Not with anger, with clarity. I realized then, no one was coming to save me. I had to save myself. Here's what's strange. I had every weapon in my hand. I could have stood up and read that group chat to 200 people. I could have forwarded the whole thread to Daniel and let the truth do its own demolition. I could have made a scene that would echo through the Shenandoah Valley for a generation. I did none of it, because my grandmother spent her last 3 years in a twin bed in my guest room, watching cardinals through the window I'd positioned her toward. Her memory deserved better than a screaming match at a vineyard, and the moment I made a scene, I'd become exactly what Sloane had named. The dramatic one, the unstable one. I'd prove her lie by trying to disprove it, so I set the phone face down on the chair, folded my hands, and made the only move that couldn't be turned against me. I decided to stay, to sit perfectly still, to be calm where they expected hysteria. What I didn't know was that someone else had already been working, quietly, methodically, for weeks. The Whitlocks had a tradition. before any marriage that touched the family trust. Margaret personally reviewed the union, not with lawyers, not with investigators, but with phone calls. And in the weeks before the wedding, she'd made 3. The first was to the care facility where Gran received home health support. The director remembered the granddaughter who came every day, who brought cornbread, who slept in the chair during the last week. She did not remember a Sloan. The second was to NC State's Public Commencement Archive. Brooke Bennett, Bachelor of Science, Structural Engineering, 2017. No Sloan Bennett, any year. The third was to Janet Hubbard, my grandmother's neighbor of 40 years, who told Margaret everything, including the pearl earrings that vanished from Gran's dresser after the funeral. Margaret didn't confront anyone. She wanted to see how the family behaved in public, whether the lie was Sloane's alone or something they'd all agreed to stage. The orange dress answered that question. The photographer answered it again. By the time she stood up at that reception, Margaret Whitlock already knew everything. She'd just been waiting for the room to see it too. She caught me near the coat check on my way out. "I think you should stay for the toasts, Brooke. You'll want to be here for what comes after." She tapped her cane twice against the tile, a period at the end of a sentence. They had no idea what was coming. The maid of honor's toast was polished, rehearsed. She talked about Sloane's incredible journey. A woman who put herself through school, built a career with her own 2 hands, and nursed her beloved grandmother through her final days. Every word was a brick from the house Sloane had built on top of my life. I sat at table 14 in my orange dress and listened to a stranger eulogize my biographies under someone's name. "To Sloane," she said, lifting her glass, "the strongest woman I know." 200 people raised their champagne. I raised my water, and across the room, Margaret Whitlock did not lift her glass. She set down her napkin, placed both hands on her cane, and began to stand. In that family, Margaret was the signature on the last page, the one that made everything official. The conversations died, heads turned. The DJ paused. She took a young cousin's arm and walked slowly, deliberately, toward the back of the room, toward me. She lowered herself into the empty chair beside mine, the one nobody had wanted all night, and she took my hand. "Please don't get up," she said. Then she turned to the room. My mother got their first fundraiser smile at full wattage. "Mother Whitlock, how wonderful. This is my eldest. She's a bit shy, keeps to herself, you know how?" Margaret simply looked at her, didn't speak, didn't raise a hand, and my mother's sentence died in her throat. "I wasn't finished, dear," Margaret said, conversational, but the room heard the steel. She turned back to me. "Brooke, did you care for your grandmother during her illness?" "Yes, 3 years. To the end. And your degree?" "Structural engineering, NC State, and the firm in Raleigh, mine, co-owned, 6 years." She nodded, not with surprise, but with completion. The last piece of a puzzle clicking into place in front of witnesses. Daniel had turned fully in his chair. He wasn't looking at his grandmother anymore. He was looking at his bride. "Sloane told us she built that firm," he said to the heir. "She told us she nursed her grandmother." "She told you a great many things, Daniel," Margaret said quietly. "I made 3 phone calls before this wedding. I spoke with the director of your grandmother's care facility. I spoke with the alumni office at NC State. And I spoke with your mother's neighbor of 40 years, Janet Hubbard. The names landed like stones in still water." Sloane laughed, bright, dismissive. "Okay, this is ridiculous. His grandmother is confused. She's 79. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Every Whitlock there had just heard the bride call their matriarch confused. Margaret didn't flinch. She turned to me, still holding my hand, and said 6 words at perfectly normal volume. "You're not the sister she described." And then the room went completely silent. "The woman in this dress is Brooke Bennett," Margaret continued. "She put herself through college waiting tables, and she spent 3 years caring for her grandmother, until Ruth passed in Brooke's guest bedroom, holding Brooke's hand. Your bride told us she did things. I'm afraid none of it was true." Then, gently, almost apologetically, "I also know about the debts." That was the fracture point, not the degree. The debts, 4 maxed cards, a personal loan, 2 months behind on rent. The reason Sloane needed Daniel. The reason for the lavender gowns, the grand entrance, the fabricated life. Daniel stood. His chair scraped, the loudest sound in the room. Sloane turned to me, and the mask came all the way off. This was supposed to be my day. You couldn't even give me that. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The room had already answered for me. She picked up her train with both hands and walked out the side door. It closed with a click, not a slam. Somehow that was worse. That dress had been a costume designed to make me disappear. Now, with Margaret holding my hand in front of every guest, it was a spotlight, and nobody could look away. The marriage was never finalized. The officiant never filed the license, and Daniel never signed it. Margaret withdrew the family's blessing the following Monday. I drove back to Raleigh that night, with the windows cracked and the radio off. Somewhere near Greensboro, I pulled over, changed into jeans, and left the orange dress folded on the passenger seat like a skin I'd shed. My mother called 3 days later. I let it ring. She called again. I let that ring too. 6 weeks after that, she and Sloane showed up at my office asking me to fix it, to call Margaret to cover the debts, to soften the story. I'm not going to fix this, I told them. Not because you're bad people, because you used everything I gave you, and you used it to erase me. My mother opened her mouth. I watched her start to form the word dramatic, and I watched her stop. I'm not being dramatic, I said. I'm being done. The people who hand you the ugliest dress are usually the most afraid of how you'll look when you finally stand up straight. I didn't get an apology. I got something better. I got to stop shrinking.